We're in the desert of Yamamah. Just imagine it, a sea of sand that was about to drink the blood of thousands. The very fate of Islam hung in the balance, right here, in this one single brutal battle. This is the story of the day the lines broke. And you can almost feel it, right? The blinding sun, the grit of sand in the air. It's the golden hour, and these long, ominous shadows are stretching out over the dunes. This was so much more than a battle. It was a test of a young nation's very soul. So the lines are drawn. On one side, you've got the Muslim army, led by the legendary commander Khalid ibn al-Waleed. And he's a master tactician. He's got his forces arranged with precision: vanguard, flanks, cavalry. The families and the women, they're in the rear, which was a pretty standard formation. But facing them was the massive army of Musaylimah. Now, this was a man who had declared himself a prophet, and he'd gathered a huge following that was threatening to just shatter the foundations of the entire Muslim state. Now, the enemy leader, Musaylimah, he was no fool. He knew exactly how to motivate his people. He stoked the fires of his army with this raw, really visceral appeal. He basically framed the battle as a last stand, not for some political idea, but for their honor and for their families. Okay, so the banners are raised. You can just see them snapping in that hot desert wind. The banner of the Muhajirin, the first emigrants from Mecca, was held by Salam. The banner of the Ansar, the helpers from Medina who had welcomed them, that was carried by Thabit ibn Qays. The lines were set. The clash was coming. And then it happens. The first clash. The sound of steel on steel, the roar of thousands of men. But the Bedouin tribes, the ones positioned on the Muslim flanks, they broke. They just fled. You have to understand, this was a complete tactical nightmare. In ancient warfare, a break in the line is a death sentence. And the enemy, they didn't hesitate for a second. They poured through that gap like a flood, a torrent of men and weapons aimed right at the heart of the Muslim camp. The retreat turned into a rout. They ran all the way back to the camp, to the tents. They got inside Khalid's own tent. It was absolute chaos. The very place where the women and families were supposed to be safe was now the front line. For a moment there, under that searing sun, with sand and steel swirling everywhere, it really truly felt like it was over. But then, a cry goes up, and it wasn't a military command. It wasn't a general shouting orders to reform the lines. It was something else, something much deeper than strategy. The Ansar and the Muhajirin, the core of this army, they started calling out to one another, reminding each other of who they were and of a strength that didn't just come from them. It was a call to the Quran itself. A reminder of a prayer they all knew by heart, a promise they had made. It was a source of power they could tap into, right when all their physical strength seemed to be failing them. And this right here goes to the very heart of what the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, had taught them. See, the Quran wasn't just words to be recited. It was a source of deep, profound spiritual stability. And that inner stillness, that spiritual core, it translated directly into physical resolve. They stopped running. They turned. They planted their feet in the shifting sands of Yamamah. And just like that, the tide of the battle turned. That broken line reformed into this elite, unbreakable force. They pushed back with so much ferocity that the enemy's advance just crumbled. The rebels fled, taking refuge inside a large walled garden, and they barricaded the gates for one final, desperate stand. So how do you breach a fortress in the middle of a battle? Well, one man, al-Bara ibn Malik, he had an answer that's so audacious it's almost hard to believe. It wasn't really a plan. It was a willing sacrifice. His commitment was just that absolute. And they did it. They put him on their shields, lifted him high, and literally threw him over the wall all alone into the heart of the enemy. And listen, it wasn't just the men. Take Nusaybah bint Qays. She had sworn an oath that she would not put down her weapon until the enemy was defeated. She fought with incredible bravery, and she returned to Medina with 12 wounds, each one a testament to her resolve. This was the kind of resolve these individual fighters had. Just total, unwavering commitment. Zayd ibn al-Khattab, who was the brother of the future Caliph, Omar, made this vow, and he fought until he fell, a martyr on that battlefield. So the gate is open. Inside the garden, Musaylimah himself is standing in a gap in a wall. And Washi, the very same man who had killed the Prophet's uncle years before, saw his chance. He balanced his javelin, and he threw. The spear struck home. At that very same moment, the warrior Abu Dujana rushed forward, striking Musaylimah with his sword. And just like that, the false prophet was dead. The rebellion was broken. So, victory. But the silence that followed the roar of battle, it was heavy. This victory, secured by these incredible acts of heroism, came at a staggering price. Around 600 Muslims had fallen.
The losses were just devastating, and among the dead were many senior companions of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. But critically, this included a huge number of Hafaz. These were the men who had memorized the entire Quran by heart.
And that cost was so great that it actually changed the course of history. The Caliph Abu Bakr, fearing that the words of revelation could be lost forever along with the men who held them in their hearts, made the momentous decision to compile the Quran for the very first time into a single written book. So when you hear these stories of sacrifice, of being thrown over walls, of fighting with a dozen wounds, you just have to step back and ask, right? What kind of faith, what depth of belief leads to that kind of courage? And maybe the best way to understand it is with this one last story. Remember Thabit ibn Qays, the standard bearer? He was killed in the battle. Well, after his death, he appeared in a dream to another soldier, and he revealed where his stolen shield was, and even dictated his will. The soldier told Khalid they found the shield exactly where the dream said it would be, and the Caliph Abu Bakr honored and carried out the will of a man who was already gone. Their connection to their faith was so profound, it literally transcended death itself.